Right, so hello everybody. On my own today, lone soldier, no Martin, he's off pretending to be busy somewhere else. Something a little bit different today, transit for a wet belt and full service. So I'll just talk you through the start, how we start it, what we take off, so on and so forth, and then we'll come back to it when I've done a little bit. I'll run through the bits we use and everything like that. So I've already drained the oil, get that out, because obviously we've got to take the sump off to do the oil pump belt and put a new strainer in the sump. So everything we take off, got to have the headlight out, a few ancillary bits here, take the airbox out, that's got to come out anyway, put a new air filter in it. I always take a few little bits off, drain the coolant because it's having a new water pump. I'll show you that when it's out. They're always a little bit difficult to get out. I don't know why, they seem to corrode in a little bit and they're on like an O-ring, so you've got to give them a good tug to get them out. But that's that so far. And parts, I've got all laid out here. So we use everything's obviously genuine Ford. Don't mess around with the copy parts. Yes, they're a bit cheaper, but they're not as good. I know this cover for the diesel pump like to leak on the non-genuine ones, so we don't really get involved in that too much. So we got genuine cover, new wet belt tensioner. With the cover you get new engine mount bolts and a coolant plug that goes in the cover here. New wet belt, new water pump, as I said. This is the oil pump belt, which is in the sump. You have to take the sump off to change that. So fit a new one of them. 2 new auxiliary belts because we're taking them off. So you want to be fitting new really. Over here we've got this pickup pipe and oil pickup strainer. All that gets replaced. In there I'll show you, depending on how bad the belt is, the gauze that's in there gets quite blocked when the belt starts to degrade. And obviously a new sump, the new sump plug comes in it, all genuine Ford. Oh, and the sealant, I've got 2, I don't always use 2, but it's very close to being able to do it with 1. So I'll crack on, get it stripped out, and then we'll touch base again. Right, so little update. We've progressed nicely. As you can see, headlights out, should be here, obviously. Airbox is out, coolant pipes and stuff that run across the front of the cover, they're all removed. You don't have to take them off, just makes life a lot easier if you do. Water pump is out, and I've cleaned that up, so it's all ready to be refitted. I will insert a picture of what it's like when you take it out. It is quite corroded and mucky. It's nice to get it nice and new. So that's all sorted. I've also got the main power down to the starter disconnected because we take the starter out to put the locking tool in for the crank. The starter is all removed. So that's where we are. The ratchet strap doesn't look the best, but that water pump is really, really difficult to get out. So instead of jacking the engine up really high and stretching everything, what I like to do is just jack it up a little bit and then put a ratchet strap on and pull it forward. And that allows you to slide the water pump in and out much easier, because if you leave it in place, it will not come out. It's too big, but it does if you pull the engine forward a little bit. And yeah, it's just a nice way of doing it, and nice and safe, and you're not yanking on anything to try and get it in and out. So I'll put the water pump back in now, and then we can let the ratchet strap off, and that's that. We don't need to pull it forward again. Then the next thing to do is the crankshaft locking tool in. So then we can undo the crank, pull the crankshaft pulley off, take this end cover off, which should expose the wet belt. And then once we've got that off, we then put the engine mount back on loosely, because we need to get the sump off and the jack's on the sump. So then we'll go underneath, take the sump down, swap the pickup and the pipe, fit a new oil pump belt. Yeah, and that's sort of that. And then the sump can go back on, and then we can look at changing the belt. I'll just show you the water pump. So this is the old one that's come out. Obviously you can see it's pretty mucky. And this one wasn't too bad to come out, but they do corrode around here, which makes them really difficult to get out. And because they're so cylindrical and they sit in so far, they like to jam. So you got to pull them out nice and square. And there's a new one all ready to go in. A little bit of red rubber grease on the seal, just to help it seal and slide in, no pinching and splitting the seal. So I'll get that fitted, get the cover off, get the sump down, and then we'll touch base again. Right, so another little catch up on where we've got to. Obviously now the sump's off. This is your oil pickup, oil return. They're both new, swap them. We'll go and inspect the other ones that are on the bench in a minute and have a look and see what sort of debris is in the filter and stuff. The oil pump belt, I've changed that. Easier to take the pump down. I just drop the pump, change the belt, put the pump back on. You can get it off with the pump on, but it's just really fiddly. It will make life harder. So we'll go and have a look at the strainer and stuff that's on the bench, which is here. This is the old strainer. Like I said earlier, in the gauge you get bits of belt and debris and stuff. This one's actually pretty good. There was a couple tiny bits in there, but not too bad at all, which is a good sign, because obviously none of it's got around the engine and gone in other places. The return, we just changed that to make sure it's not blocked. The belt, it's in fairly good condition, but if you look closely, you can just see the teeth are just starting to delaminate off the belt. So that's where we get our debris from that's going around the engine when the inside of the belt starts to break up. And you'll also get the edge here will fray a little bit. So that belt's in okay condition. It needed changing because it's starting to go. Get the new sump on now, and then we can get the vehicle back down, time the engine, get the main wet belt off, and then we can inspect that, put the new tensioner on, refill the belt, and then we're sort of on our way back together. Right, so we're now starting to get somewhere. As you can see, the old belt's off. I've still yet to change the tensioner, but we're all timed up. 2 pins in the camshaft there, as you can see, or camshafts, as you can see. New water pumps all in, done. Paint marked up, so we know that's tight. Down here, I'm not sure what you can see. There's our locking tool for the crank. The belt doesn't actually run on the crank, it runs on another pulley, this one up here. The timing marks are in here, and they correspond between this pulley and that pulley. Really difficult to see. I've took some pictures which I'll insert so you can see. It's 2 like pink marks. There's two marks on this pulley and one on this pulley. So obviously the one goes in between the 2, and you know where we are. Yeah, so that's that. Go and have a look at the belt that's come off. Again, it's not in the worst condition, but it certainly needs changing. Here's the old belt. Again, like the oil pump belt, you can just see the teeth are just starting to go. So I've seen them a lot worse, but you don't want to be pushing it too far. And somewhere on the belt here, you can see it's just starting to, I don't know where you can see that. See how it's just starting to break up a little bit as well? That's what they do. And what you get in the strainer when you have all the oil pressure issues is the bits of belt starting to break up. But like I say, this one isn't too bad, but it's definitely worth changing. We have serviced this vehicle for a number of years, so it's had regular oil changes, which massively helps. So we'll get the new tensioner on, get the new belt on, that's that done. And then, like I say, we're already timed up, so it's just a case of fit the new belt, rotate the engine. On these you've got to do, I'm pretty sure off the top of my head, I'm 99% sure it's 14 revolutions you've got to do to get the marks to line back up. Ridiculous, I know, but that's how they line up. So we'll put the new belt on, new tensioner on, do our 14 rotations, and then I'll show you all the new belt fitted. Right, so there we go, new belt is on, new tensioner is fitted, taken all the timing pins out, done the 14 revolutions of the crank. It is 14. It's just the way that the gearing works. You've got to do 14 to make the marks line up again. I always do put, you can't really see it that well, a couple of extra little marks on there just for my point of reference and stuff. It's up to anyone else if they want to do that. It's not right, it's not wrong, it's just being a bit more cautious. Yeah, other than that, we're pretty squared away. Couple little things that I haven't said is power steering pump. You have to take that off to get the front cover off. Other than that, it's fairly straightforward. I'll put the cover on now, put all the bits and bobs back on, There's an electronic water pump there, it's got to go back on, all the coolant hoses, engine mount back on, so on and so forth. I always try and get that on, the engine mount on really quickly after I've put the cover on, because it goes through the cover and the sealant, again it helps to hold the sealant in place. Before I put the cover on, I picked this up from doing the RS's. There is obviously a couple joins. You've got sort of your, it's like your rocker cover joins here, and where the cylinder head joins here, and the lower crankcase then a bit further down, there's just a couple joins in the engine casings. I always put the sealant on the cover, but I always just put a bit on there just to make sure we're getting in there nicely, just to minimize leakage. Obviously you don't want any leaking. As you can see, I've already cleaned it up. I do all the cleaning before I take any of the belts and stuff off, and then I do a good clean up, make sure it's all mint, and then wash it all down with brake cleaner, so all the bits end up in the sump, and then obviously the sump comes down anyway, so any debris of silicone and sealer and stuff that gets left in there from us cleaning gets flushed out by the brake cleaner and all gets washed out and ends up in the sump, new sump on, so you know it's as good as can be. So like I say, yeah, cover on, crankshaft pulley in. We always fit a new pulley. I'll go over why in a minute. This one isn't too bad, but again, I'll explain why. A little bit of rubber grease on the outside of the new crankshaft pulley, because it sits in the crankshaft oil seal that's in the cover. Just helps that slide in nicely, doesn't pick anything up, doesn't damage it. Yeah, just again, preventing leaks. We don't want any leaks. So the new crankshaft pulley will go on, put all the bits and bobs on, and then I'll finish and it's done, and then I always leave it overnight before we put any oil into the engine, because obviously it's got sealant. I think it's like a 4-hour set time on the sealant, but I like to leave it overnight. It's pretty cold today, so the longer you can leave it the better. And then come in the morning, fire it, obviously fill it with antifreeze and coolant, and away you go, and there it is. Run it up, make sure your heater works and stuff, and it's all good to go. And then tomorrow, after we've done that initial startup, we'll then just finish the service bits, do the fuel filter. I always like to put the fuel filter on after I've done the belt and it's all running right, because it might take a bit of cranking because of obviously air that's in the fuel system. You don't want to put any extra load on the belt and stuff whilst it's new. Get it to fire, get the oil pressure up there. But yeah, like I say, the timing tool's back in. So what I'll do now is take the timing pins out, put the cover on, and then the last thing before I do the crank bolt up, put a new bolt in obviously, is put the locking pin back in, or the locking tool back in the flywheel, because the torque setting on this is ridiculous. I have got it written down. Basically you end up on like 300 Newton meters plus 90 degrees, which is crazy. You've really got a swing on it. It nearly maxes out the torque wrench. But that's how tight Ford say it's got to be, so that's how tight we do it. And then the pulley. So this is our new pulley from Ford. I didn't show you this earlier because it hadn't arrived. But let me just find. So this is the old one. It's still got the tool on it to pull it off. If you look closely, I don't know if you can see it particularly well. See, there's a line on it, just in the middle. That line shouldn't be there. Obviously there's no line on that one. Like I say, this one isn't particularly bad. Sometimes you can feel that ridge. If you run your fingernail over it, or like a Stanley blade, the sharp edge of a Stanley over it, you can feel it. I can't feel it on this one, but that's not to say it's on its way out, because there's a line there, and then we don't want the new belt outlasting this pulley, and it's rubber mounted, so we always change it, and then you know it's good and it's going to last the duration of the next belt. And then if we did the belt again, we'd fit another one. But other than that, we are pretty much there. Like I said, the new belt's on, put it all back together and fire it up. So the next time you see, we should be running, or pretty much there. Right, so here we are the next morning, all finished. Everything's buttoned up, barring putting the headlight on. Got a few little bits to finish on the service, top the washers up. tyre pressures, fit the fuel filter. Just got to set the oil level. I've filled it up. We've had it running this morning. It's started absolutely perfect. Just got to set the level of the antifreeze, coolant, whichever one you want to call it. That'll be after road test, obviously. So that's all good. Yeah, started lovely, as I expected. Give it a good check over. Everything seems fine, nothing's leaking. Just go over it again when I come back from road test later, obviously. I'll just go over again what we've fitted parts wise. So we've got the 2 belts, the water pump belt. That's a stretch belt, so I just cut it off. I don't know if that's right or wrong, but it's easier to get it off. You're not putting it back on, so. And then that's the main auxiliary belt. Drives the aircon, alternator, so on and so forth. Got a new crank pulley we fitted. Like I said yesterday, this one isn't particularly bad, but whilst we're in there and it's not going to be coming off again for a while, just change it. New bolt, because it's a stretch bolt and the torque is ridiculous on it. Got our 2 new, obviously our oil pump belt and our wet cam belt. They've both been replaced. Cam belt tensioner with a new bolt. That all gets replaced, comes with it from Ford. This doesn't have a tensioner, it just sort of sits on the 2 pulleys and it's taut. New water pump, coolant pump. That's all been replaced with a new seal. And like you seen yesterday, we cleaned it all up. And the specialist tools we use, crankshaft puller, because that pulley is tight to get off. So just use a puller, and then just a timing kit. It's pretty generic. Well, it's not generic, it's for most of the forwards or wet belts. But yeah, that's all we use specialist wise. And we use the correct forward sealant. That's what they say to stick the cover on with and the sump on with. And I'll just show you why we change. This is why we change, fit a new cover. You can't use it again because it's bonded on, and by the time you got it off, it's unusable. You'll never ever get that to seal. The sump isn't too bad, but again, you damage it a bit getting it off. You can just see there's like a tab on the bottom of the engine. You can just lever against and it damages it, so again, it will never seal again. And that's our other 2 components that go in the sump, the pickup and the oil return. So yeah, job done. Get it out the workshop, road test, and then get the next one in, which is waiting outside for me. So we'll see you on the next one.